Hey there, come a little closer to the fire, because the strangest part of our human story is not that we survived. It is that for a very long time, we were not alone. Picture a forest in Europe, about 50,000 years ago. The air is cold enough to make every breath visible. Frost lies on the grass like powdered bone. Somewhere between the trees, a thin ribbon of smoke rises into the evening. You follow it slowly, stepping over roots, hearing the soft crack of frozen twigs underfoot. At first, it feels familiar. Smoke means warmth. Smoke means food. Smoke means people. Then one of those people turns. The face is human, but not quite yours. The brow is heavy, the nose broad, the chest deep, the shoulders thick as if winter has pressed the body into a stronger shape. A hand rests near a stone tool. Another figure moves behind the fire. A child sits close to the warmth. They are not beasts. They are not monsters from a cave painting. They are human, fully human. But they are not Homo sapiens. They are Neanderthals. And far beyond this forest, other fires are burning. In the cold mountains of Asia, Denisovans may be moving through caves and high valleys. On warm islands to the south, tiny humans no taller than a modern child are walking under wet leaves. In Africa, other strange branches of the human family are living, climbing, hunting, and carrying their dead into dark places. The earth is crowded with human voices. That is the old truth we are going to follow tonight. Once, we shared this planet with many other kinds of humans. And then, slowly, every one of them vanished. If this quiet road through deep time keeps you company, you can like the video and subscribe so we can keep walking these old paths together. Now, let the room become simple. Firelight, candlelight, a slower breath, and the sound of a story beginning. I have always found it strange that we use the word human as if it has always meant one thing. One face, one body, one species, one lonely branch standing under the stars. But deep time tells a different story. For most of the time, humans have existed. There were several kinds of us. Not tribes, not races. Species. That close enough to recognize something in their eyes, but distant enough that their bones carried other answers to the same ancient problem. How do you stay alive? How do you find food when the herds move away? How do you keep a child warm when the wind comes through the mouth of the cave? How do you remember water in a dry season? How do you teach a hand to make the same tool your teacher once showed you? How do you bury someone whose voice will not return? The old world answered those questions in many ways. Neanderthals became masters of cold Europe and Western Asia. Their bodies were compact, powerful, built for long winters, close hunts, and heavy work. Denisovans left only a few bones at first, yet their DNA later told us that they once ranged across enormous parts of Asia. Homo floresiensis, the little humans of Flores, lived on an island where evolution made bodies small and survival precise. Homo naledi, deep in South Africa, carried a strange mixture of old and modern traits. Small-brained but possibly capable of treating the dead with intention, other names, appear like candles in the dark. Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo lutzonensis, Dragon Man, Red Deer Cave people, and still others that may have left no bones we have found. Each name is a door. Behind each door, a life. It is easy to imagine them as rough drafts of us. That is the old ladder picture, with simple creatures at the bottom and modern humans at the top, looking pleased with ourselves, which is very on brand for us. But evolution was not climbing a ladder toward our face. It was branching like a dark forest. Some branches grew tall. Some curled toward islands. Some thickened in cold places. Some stayed small and clever in hidden valleys. Some crossed water. Some vanished before anyone could leave a clear trace. They were not trying to become us. They were trying to survive as themselves. That matters. It changes the mood of the whole story. A Neanderthal shaping a scraper beside a fire is not a failed version of you. A Denisovan child breathing thin mountain air is not a footnote. A small human on Flores cutting meat from a dwarf elephant is not a joke written in bone. These were people with mornings, hunger, patience, fear, play, and sleep. They may have had jokes too, though with no surviving punchlines, which is honestly one of the great losses of archaeology. The evidence is quiet, but it keeps speaking. Stone tools show planning. Fire shows control over danger and comfort. Burials, where they are accepted, suggest care or memory, perhaps even belief. Healed injuries show that some individuals lived long after they would have needed help. Pigments and ornaments hint at symbols, though we should speak softly here, because scholars debate what some marks and objects mean. The past does not always hand us a clean answer. Sometimes it gives us a shell with a hole in it, a smear of red ochre, a body placed carefully in earth, and asks us to listen. And then there is DNA. This is where the story turns from ancient dust to the living body. For a long time, many scientists believed modern humans left Africa and simply replaced every other human species without mixing with them. A clean story. A simple story. Too simple. Ancient DNA broke it open. If your ancestry is from Europe or Asia, part of your genome likely comes from Neanderthals. A small part, often around 1 or 2%. But small does not mean meaningless. If your ancestry reaches into Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, Aboriginal Australia, or some parts of Southeast Asia, you may also carry Denisovan DNA. Some populations carry genetic signs that seem to come from even older unknown humans, groups whose fossils have not been clearly found or whose bones have not yet given up their secrets. Scientists call them ghost populations. Ghost populations. It sounds like something a tired museum guard might whisper after the lights go out. But the meaning is real. These are vanished humans, detected not by skulls in a drawer, but by strange fragments of inheritance still moving through living blood. Think of that gently. Somewhere inside modern bodies are old solutions from people who are gone. Immune genes that may have helped against ancient disease. Skin and hair variants shaped by cold climates and weak sunlight. a Denisovan gene that helps some people live at high altitude, where the air is thin and every breath must be used well. The dead are not speaking with voices, but they are still working in cells. You and I are not made from one clean line. We are mosaics, living museums, walking archives. A little dramatic, yes, but sometimes the truth earns the drama. This is why the disappearance of the other humans feels so strange. They vanished as separate peoples, yet pieces of them remained. When the last Neanderthal died, perhaps somewhere near the far western edges of Europe, the species did not vanish in a single clean breath. Some of its genes had already crossed into Homo sapiens' bodies. When Denisovans faded from the world, some of their inheritance traveled onward into children who were not fully Denisovan, not fully what came before, but human in that blurred, ancient way nature seems to prefer. Boundaries that look sharp in textbooks were softer in life. Imagine again that first forest. A modern human group may be moving through a valley they do not know well. Neanderthals already know every cave, every spring, every place where the animals pass when snow gathers. The two groups see each other. There is fear, surely. Curiosity too. Maybe anger. Maybe hunger. Maybe, on some evenings, a careful exchange. A tool. A hide. A warning. A child staring too long at strangers by the fire. Some meetings may have been violent. Some may have been peaceful. Many were probably ordinary in the way human encounters become ordinary after enough time. Suspicion becomes habit. Habit becomes contact. Contact becomes marriage, captivity, alliance, adoption, or something we no longer have words for. The DNA only tells us that children were born, and some of those children lived. That is enough to change everything. For tonight, keep one image close. A planet with many fires. Neanderthal fires in icy valleys. Denisovan fires in caves and high places. Small island fires under wet leaves. African fires near stone and bone and dust. Around each one, human hands are busy. Around each one, someone is tired. Someone is hungry. Someone is watching the dark and hoping morning will come. Now all those fires are gone, except Earth. This is not yet the answer to why. It is the beginning of the question. To understand the vanishing, we have to step even farther back, before Neanderthals and Denisovans, before the island hobbits, before our own kind spread across the world. We have to meet the first great wanderer, the one who carried the human experiment out of Africa and taught later branches what distance could mean. Before we follow those footsteps, notice how quiet the change feels. No thunder announces a new species. No mountain opens with a voice. A mother carries a child. A hunter lifts a stone. A group moves because the old water hole has dried. Generation after generation, the ordinary becomes historic only because time is vast enough to make it so. That is the mood of this whole story. Not sudden monsters in the dark, but slow absences. Not one grand extinction, but 1,000 little endings. A cave left unused. A trail no longer followed. A language no child learns. A face that once belonged to a people, then becomes only a fragment in another people. Deep time does not hurry. It erases with a calm hand. The forest darkens behind us. The smoke thins. The cold trees dissolve into older air, warmer dust, Vida skies. Somewhere ahead, long legs are moving across open ground, and the first great road of humanity is being made one footstep at a time. The old African light is low now, soft as ash at the edge of the day. Beneath the crackle of our fire, you can almost hear another sound from far away, the steady rhythm of feet crossing ground that has no road yet. Homo erectus begins there, in heat, dust, and long horizons. Not as a statue, not as a hero in a museum pose, but as a living body with hunger in the belly, stone in the hand, and children moving close behind. This species was one of the great survivors of the human family. It lasted for nearly 2 million years. Let that number rest for a moment. Nearly 2 million years. Our cities, our alphabets, our towers, our arguments about parking, all of it is a blink beside the age of Homo erectus. They appeared around 2 million years ago in Africa, though the edges of the story are blurred. Some researchers separate early African forms into Homo ergaster. Others see a broad and variable erectus lineage. A human form was changing. The body was becoming taller. The legs were lengthening. The arms were shorter in proportion than before. The hips were narrower. The whole frame seemed to say one thing: walk. Walk through dry grass. Walk beside rivers. Walk over ridges where the wind carries the smell of animals. Walk when fruit is gone. Walk when water sinks into mud. Walk because the herds move, because the season turns, because the old place no longer feeds everyone. Walk into land your grandparents never saw. Then teach your children that this new land is home. A body can be a map of a way of life. The erectus body was mapped for distance. Long legs saved energy. Strong tendons helped each step return force to the next. The head balanced more efficiently over the spine. Even the inner ear suggests better balance than earlier humans. These were not tree-bound creatures making occasional trips across the ground. They were committed walkers, and that commitment changed the world. Within a few 100,000 years, Homo erectus or closely related humans moved beyond Africa. Not in one dramatic wave, with everyone packing neatly, which would have been impressive, but unlikely. More probably, small groups moved little by little, following food, water, stone, and chance. One valley, then another. One river bend, then another. The map expanded because feet kept choosing the next visible place. At Dmanisi, in what is now Georgia, fossils show early humans outside Africa around 1.8 million years ago. They carried a mixture of older and newer traits, with brains still modest by later standards. Yet there they were, standing in a world of cold seasons, unfamiliar animals, and mountains on the horizon. Farther east, erectus reached China. Farther still, Java, where volcanic earth preserved bones from an astonishingly long human presence. Imagine that journey without a map. No names for continents. Just land, weather, hunger, memory. A child learns where the stream runs clear. An adult notices which stone flakes well. Knowledge moves not in books, but in bodies. This is one of the first great gifts Homo erectus carried forward. Tradition. Their brains averaged around 900 cubic centimeters, larger than earlier humans, smaller than ours. But brain size alone is never the whole answer. What matters is what a brain can do with hands, eyes, memory, and other minds nearby. Homo erectus made tools that were not random broken stones, but repeated forms. The most famous is the Acheulean hand axe. Picture one in the palm. A teardrop of stone, shaped on both sides, heavy enough to feel serious, sharp enough to cut. It could butcher animals, scrape hides, chop plants, dig roots, and shape wood. The important thing is the pattern. Similar hand axes appear across huge distances and immense stretches of time. That means someone knew the shape before the stone became it. Someone taught it. Someone copied it. Someone failed, tried again, and learned how the angle of a strike could free a sharp flake. Slow the moment down. A young erectus sits near an older toolmaker. Dust gathers on both knees. The older hand turns the stone, searching for the right edge. A hammerstone rises. It falls. A flake snaps away and lands with a soft tick. The younger one watches. Maybe there is no language as we know it. Maybe there are gestures, grunts, patient corrections, a hand placed over a hand. The lesson passes anyway. The shape in the stone becomes a shape in the mind. That is culture. Quiet, practical, stubborn culture. And then there is fire. Fire is difficult in the deep past because it does not always leave honest evidence. Wildfires can burn bones. Ash can wash away. Charcoal can vanish. Some scholars argue Homo erectus was using fire regularly by around 1 million years ago, perhaps earlier. Others are cautious, because ancient hearths can be hard to prove. But by later erectus times, and certainly among later humans, fire becomes one of the great centers of human life. The meaning of fire is more than warmth. It changes food. Cooked meat and roots are easier to chew and digest. It pushes night animals back from the camp. It lets a group sit together after sunset, when the day would otherwise be swallowed by dark. Picture it now. A small camp under a wide sky. Smoke bends low in the evening wind. Someone carries branches. Someone cracks a bone for marrow. A child leans against an adult leg. Beyond the fire, eyes may be watching from the grass. Inside the glow, hands are busy. Faces are lit from below, and the night has a center. Maybe this is where certain human habits deepened. Sharing, watching, remembering, teaching, Perhaps simple stories began as gestures in firelight. A hand becomes an antelope. A pointing arm becomes a path. A low sound means danger near the water. We cannot know the exact voices of Homo erectus, but it is hard to imagine fire without communication growing around it. Slowly, like warmth spreading through stone. They also hunted, though their exact balance of hunting and scavenging changed across time and place. Earlier humans likely took meat where they could find it, sometimes from carcasses left by predators, which is a bold plan if you enjoy negotiating with hyenas. Homo erectus and later related groups show more systematic butchery and growing skill in processing large animals. Cut marks, broken bones, repeated sights, all suggest planning and cooperation. A large animal is not taken by one brave person having a dramatic moment. It takes patience, tracks in mud, knowledge of where herds move, a group spreading out at the right time, a dangerous closeness to hooves, horns, teeth, and panic. Injury was not a small inconvenience then. Survival depended not only on strength, but on others caring enough to help. This is why the long life of Homo erectus matters. They were not merely wandering. They were building a way of being human that could last. Their range was immense. Africa, Western Eurasia, China, Indonesia, tropical forests, open grasslands, river valleys, coastal lands. Some evidence even raises the possibility that very early humans reached islands separated by water, though how that happened is debated. The sea keeps fewer footprints than mud. What makes Homo erectus so remarkable is not just movement. It is endurance. Across nearly 2 million years, their basic body plan remained recognizable. Their tools changed slowly. Their way of life was stable, not because they lacked intelligence, but because it worked. Modern humans love novelty. We change tools so quickly that some of us have kitchen drawers full of chargers for devices we no longer own. Homo erectus reminds us that lasting is its own kind of brilliance. Walk well. Make reliable tools. Use fire when you can. Learn the land. Teach the young. Share what must be shared. Move when the world demands it. Stay when staying works. For a very long time, that was enough. But no species lasts forever. By around 400,000 years ago, erectus populations in some regions were being replaced by newer human forms, or transforming into them, depending on how we draw the lines. In Africa and Europe, larger-brained Middle Pleistocene humans emerged. In Asia, erectus held on longer, especially in Java. The youngest widely discussed fossils from Java may date somewhere between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago, though the details are debated. By then, other humans were already changing the world around them. Neanderthal ancestors were deepening their cold adaptations. Denisovan lineages were moving through Asia. Our own ancestors were taking shape in Africa. What ended Homo erectus? We do not know. Climate may have changed the lands they knew. Other humans may have competed with them for food and territory. Some populations may have blended into descendant groups until nothing clearly erectus remained. Some may simply have dwindled in isolated places. fewer bands each generation, until the last fires were too far apart. Extinction can be quiet like that. No final speech. No last monument. No elder standing beneath a tree and knowing that 2 million years are ending. Just a cave unused. A tool style no longer taught. A child born into a group already too small. A wet season that fails. A valley that no longer holds enough game. A stranger group arriving with different tools, different habits, and more children. Then silence. And yet, silence is not nothing. Homo erectus left foundations everywhere. Later, humans inherited the long road. Neanderthals did not invent human endurance from nothing. Denisovans did not enter Asia without older footsteps before them. Homo sapiens did not step out of Africa into a blank world. The earth had already been walked by other human feet for over 1 million years. There is humility in that. We are used to thinking of ourselves as the great travelers, the great makers, the clever ones who finally figured everything out. But the first great human success was older, quieter, and longer lasting than us. Homo erectus had no cities, no writing, no carved histories. Yet they conquered distance in the only way available to them, step by step, season by season, child after child. Now imagine a hand axe lying underground in Java. Rain falls above it. Roots curl nearby. Volcanic ash settles. The hand that shaped it has been gone for longer than memory can hold. The camp that used it is gone. The species that carried such tools across the old world is gone. But the stone still keeps the shape of intention. That may be the most human thing about it. As our fire lowers, the glow turns red inside the wood. The old wanderer moves away into the dark, not forgotten, only farther down the trail. Ahead of us, another human waits much closer in time, closer in blood, and for more than a century, terribly misunderstood. In the cold valleys of Europe, beneath winter skies, the Neanderthals are tending their fires. For more than a century, we got them wrong. The word Neanderthal became an insult. A small stone people could throw at anyone they thought was crude, stubborn, or slow. Old drawings made them hunched and dim, with heavy arms and empty eyes, as if they had wandered out of a nightmare and forgotten how to stand up straight. Museums once placed them in the half-light of human failure, close enough to us to be embarrassing, far enough away to be dismissed. But the bones were patient. They waited while we laughed. They waited while we drew them badly. They waited while scientists learned to ask better questions. The first recognized Neanderthal remains were found in the Neander Valley of Germany in the 19th century. A thick skull, heavy brow ridges, strong bones, a body that did not match the softer, modern skeletons people expected. At first, many saw brutality in those features. A heavy brow became stupidity. A strong jaw became savagery. A powerful body became proof of a simple mind. That was our mistake. And honestly, it says almost as much about us as it does about them. Because when we finally looked more carefully, the old brute began to disappear, and a much more interesting human stepped forward from the cave mouth. Start with the brain. Neanderthal brains were often as large as ours, and in many cases larger in raw volume. That does not mean they were smarter in some simple schoolroom sense. Brain size is not a trophy, and if it were, Wales would be hosting the lectures. But it does mean they were not working with some small, dull mind. They had serious mental equipment, shaped by a world that punished carelessness. Their bodies were not primitive mistakes. They were cold-weather masterpieces. Picture one standing at the edge of a winter valley, shorter than many modern humans, but thick through the chest and limbs. The arms and legs were relatively compact. The ribs formed a broad barrel. The muscles attached to bone with a force that suggests great strength. The nose was large, the face projecting, the body built to hold warmth in a world where ice could rule for months. This was not ugliness. It was adaptation. Cold favors compact bodies. Heat leaves long limbs useful. The same quiet rule appears in many animals, and in human populations too. Neanderthals had lived through the hard climate swings of Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Their bones were shaped by snow, hunger, and the need to keep moving when the land offered little mercy. Imagine the winter around them. Spruce and pine dark against a pale sky. River ice groaning in the night. Mammoths moving in the distance like hills that learn to breathe. Bison scraping snow with their hooves. The air so cold that lungs ache. A cave mouth glows with fire, and inside, hands work stone, hide, wood, and bone. Neanderthal tools were not crude lumps. The Mousterian tool tradition shows skill, planning, and long practice. Scrapers for hide, points for hunting, knives for cutting flesh and plants, flakes struck from prepared cores, each shape chosen before the final blow. There is intelligence in that preparation, the ability to imagine the useful edge before it exists. They also attached stone points to wooden shafts, making spears and other composite tools. That sounds simple until you think about what it requires. A straight piece of wood, a stone point shaped to fit, binding material, adhesive. In some places, Neanderthals made birch tar, a dark, sticky glue that requires heating bark in controlled conditions with little oxygen. That is not a lucky accident in the ash. That is chemistry done by firelight. Somewhere in a cold camp, a Neanderthal sits close to the flames. The smell of birch bark is sharp and sweet. Smoke threads upward along the stone wall. A hand turns a point, checks the fit, presses tar into the join, wraps fiber around wood and stone. Not hurried, not stupid. Careful. The finished weapon may one day be held at close range against an animal much larger than the hunter. That was another part of their world. Neanderthals hunted dangerous prey, often in landscapes where visibility was poor and the body had to come close to the target. Horses, bison, deer, woolly rhinoceros, even mammoths in some places. Close hunting leaves marks on the skeleton. Broken bones, healed injuries, trauma that reminds some researchers of people who live around large, dangerous animals today. Those healed injuries matter. A break that heals means survival. Survival often means help. Someone brought food. Someone kept watch. Someone did not leave the injured one to vanish in the snow. Neanderthal life was hard, but hardness is not the opposite of tenderness. Sometimes hardness makes tenderness necessary. One of the most moving examples comes from La Chapelle aux Saints in France, where an elderly Neanderthal had lost many teeth before death and suffered from serious physical problems. He lived for years with difficulties that would have made survival alone almost impossible. Whether every interpretation is debated in detail or not, the broad feeling remains. These people were not simply useful until they broke. Some were kept alive by others. That is a quiet kind of humanity. Then there are the dead. At several sites, researchers have argued that Neanderthals deliberately buried some of their dead. Shanidar Cave in Iraq is famous for this. Early claims that flowers were placed with one burial remain debated, and we should not turn debate into certainty just because the image is beautiful. Still, even without flowers, the treatment of bodies matters. A body placed in earth, a bit, a position that does not look like random discard. A group returning to the same shelter where the living and the dead shared darkness. What did death mean to them? We cannot know. Perhaps they believed something. Perhaps they simply could not bear to leave a body exposed. Perhaps practical need and grief were mixed together, as they often are. A corpse near camp is dangerous. A loved one left outside is unbearable. Human motives are rarely clean. Imagine the cave. The fire is low. The stone floor is cold. Someone kneels. The body is heavy in the arms of the living. No speech we can translate. No prayer preserved. Only the slow work of placing, covering, waiting. Dust on fingers. Breath in the dark. The first silence after a familiar voice is gone. If that does not feel human, I do not know what would. Neanderthals may also have used pigments and ornaments. Perforated shells, animal teeth, red ochre, markings in caves and on objects. Some claims are debated, especially when dating is difficult or when modern human influence may be involved. But the overall picture has shifted. They were capable of symbolic behavior, or at the very least, they lived in a world where color, body, object, and meaning could touch. A smear of red on skin, a shell with a hole worn smooth, a line cut into bone. These are small things, yet small things are often where inner life leaks into the world. They were not confined to one little valley either. Neanderthals ranged from Western Europe into the Near East and across parts of Western and Central Asia. Their world stretched through climates that changed again and again. Glacial, cold. Warmer interludes. Forests expanding, then retreating. Herds moving. Rivers shifting. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years, longer than our own species has so far existed in its current form. So why did the insult survive longer than the truth? Maybe because it comforted us. It is pleasant to think the dead vanished because they deserved to. Too slow, too dull, too brutish. It makes our own survival feel tidy. But the bones refuse that comfort. Neanderthals were strong, clever, social, adaptive humans. They made tools, used fire, hunted with courage and skill, cared for the vulnerable, and may have honored the dead. And they are still with us. When scientists sequenced Neanderthal DNA, the old story broke open. People outside Africa carry Neanderthal ancestry, often around 1 to 2%, sometimes more or less, depending on population history. A tiny percentage can sound small, but spread through a genome, it is a long whisper. Some inherited segments affect immune response. Some touch skin and hair. Some are linked to pain sensitivity, sleep rhythms, fat metabolism, and disease risks in modern environments. This does not mean Neanderthals are haunting us like a curse, though I admit that would make a dramatic documentary title. It means our ancestors met them closely enough for children to be born, and for those children to become part of later human populations. The boundary between us and them was porous. Try to hold that without rushing. A Neanderthal woman, perhaps, or man, though the genetic patterns are complex and debated, becomes part of a modern human group. A child with mixed ancestry grows by a fire. No one knows that thousands of generations later, scientists in white rooms will read the old meeting in fragments of code. To the people living it, there is only the ordinary difficulty of survival. Food, weather, kin, fear, desire, loss. Somewhere in that ordinary difficulty, two human stories touched. Still, after all that strength and intelligence, the Neanderthals disappeared as a distinct people. Around 40,000 years ago, their traces become thinner. Some late refuges may have persisted longer, perhaps in southern Europe, though dates are debated. By roughly 30,000 years ago, there were no clearly separate Neanderthal populations left on Earth. Their tools stopped appearing. Their fires went cold. Their voices, whatever they sounded like, left no descendant language we can hear. Yet part of them crossed the dark bridge into us. That is the strange sadness of Neanderthals. They are gone, and not gone. Extinct, and still breathing in fragments. Misunderstood, then rediscovered. Mocked as brutes, then revealed as kin. If you were standing outside their cave in winter, you might hear little at first. Wind, ice, the shifting weight of animals beyond the valley. Then, from inside, a low murmur, the tap of stone, the crackle of burning wood. A child laughs. Maybe. An old hunter coughs. Someone lifts a hide near the fire. Someone watches the entrance, eyes reflecting orange light. For a moment, it would be easy to forget the future, easy to forget that their world is already moving toward an ending none of them can see. They are not symbols yet, not fossils, not a percentage in a genome. They are simply there, warm in the cave, alive in the dark. And then, somewhere beyond the southern horizon, another kind of human begins to move north. Imagine the meeting without music, without dramatic thunder, without anyone understanding that history has arrived. A small band of Homo sapiens moves through the Levant, somewhere between Africa and Eurasia, perhaps around 60,000 years ago, give or take thousands of years. The land is a corridor of stone, water, scrub, and wind. To the west, the sea breathes against the coast. To the east, dry country opens and closes with climate. Animals pass through when the seasons allow, and humans follow what might keep them alive. The newcomers are not an army. They are families, hunters, gatherers, children with dust on their feet, elders carrying memory in their bodies. They have left Africa in bands, some journeys failing, some becoming the beginning of everything that follows. Then they see them, other humans, stockier, broader, heavy-browed, familiar enough to be recognized, different enough to make the chest tighten. The Neanderthals are already there. They know the caves, the water sources, the roots of animals, the winter shelters, the stones that break well. Their dead are in this land. Their stories, if they had them, belonged to these hills. What happens first? No one knows. That is important. We should not pretend to hear words that are gone. There are no written records, no campfire account saying, "Today we met the strange people from the south." Only bones, tools, layers of ash, and DNA. The evidence is powerful, but it speaks in fragments. It gives us outlines, not conversations. Perhaps the first feeling was fear. Meeting another kind of human in a dangerous landscape, with hungry children behind you, must have been something else. Hands may have tightened around spears. Eyes may have counted bodies. No one would know whether the other group meant trade, warning, or attack. Some encounters probably ended badly. There may have been fights over carcasses, water, gabas, and roots. A small band pushed away from a valley could face hunger. A winter shelter taken by others could mean death. In a world of low population and high risk, even a little violence could matter. But conflict is not the whole story, because the DNA tells us something else happened too. Modern humans outside Africa carry Neanderthal ancestry. That means some of those meetings led to children, and not only children who vanished, children who lived, children who had children, children whose descendants carried Neanderthal fragments through thousands of generations into the present. For that to happen, the boundary between groups had to open, perhaps through alliance, perhaps through adoption, perhaps through marriage, perhaps through darker circumstances, because ancient contact was not always gentle. The genetic record cannot tell us whether every meeting was kind. It can only tell us that the living threads crossed. Try to picture one quieter possibility. Evening in a rocky valley. Two groups near enough to smell one another's smoke. A spring between them, or a cave mouth. The first days tense. Watching. Waiting. Then a tool exchanged. A hide. A gesture toward water. A child wanders closer than anyone planned, because children have always been ambassadors and disasters at the same time. Someone laughs despite themselves. The sound is strange, but laughter is hard to misread. Maybe that is too soft. Maybe many meetings were harsher. Still, over thousands of years, there would have been room for every kind of contact. Suspicion, fighting, trade, imitation, desire, grief, and a bit, in some caves of the Levant. Occupation layers suggest Neanderthals and modern humans used the same places at different times. One group leaves ash and stone. Centuries pass. Another group shelters there. Later, perhaps, the first returns. The cave itself becomes the witness, holding each fire in order. Stone tools also hint at exchange or influence. Some sites show methods and objects that may reflect contact, though scholars still debate the details. Around the time modern humans spread into Europe, transitional traditions appear, and the timing feels charged, like two songs briefly overlapping in the same hall. Then, slowly, the Neanderthal song fades. Not at once. Not everywhere. In the Middle East, the overlap may have lasted thousands of years. In Europe, perhaps longer in some regions. That is an enormous time. Longer than all recorded history. Long enough for encounters to become ordinary. For stories about the others to become old stories. For children of mixed ancestry to grow old. For valleys to change hands many times. By around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthal traces in Europe become scarce. By around 30,000 years ago, the distinct Neanderthal people are gone. But before we ask fully why, another ghost steps forward. The Denisovans. Their entrance into modern science is almost too quiet for the size of what it revealed. In 2008, in Denisova Cave, in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, archaeologists found a tiny finger bone from a child. Not a grand skull. Not a complete skeleton. Just a fragment, easy to overlook. The kind of bone that could sit in a tray under fluorescent light and seem modest. Then the DNA was read. It was human. But it was not modern human. It was not Neanderthal either. It belonged to a separate lineage, related to Neanderthals, but distinct. A whole kind of human appeared from the finger bone of a child. One small bone in a cold cave, and suddenly the map of humanity changes. The Denisovans became known first as genetic ghosts. For years, physical remains were few. A finger bone, several teeth, fragments. Later, a jaw from the Tibetan plateau identified through ancient proteins. We still do not have the full face of the Denisovans the way we do for Neanderthals. We are reconstructing them from scraps. Yet their DNA shows that they were widespread. Denisovan ancestry appears in people across parts of Asia and Oceania, especially in Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, Aboriginal Australia, and some island and mainland populations. That means Denisovan-related groups were not simply tucked away in one Siberian cave. They were closely related populations, must have ranged across vast parts of Asia, adapting to mountains, forests, rivers, and perhaps island routes. One of their most famous gifts lives high in the body. On the Tibetan Plateau, air is thin and difficult. Tibetan populations often carry a version of a gene called EPAS1, which helps regulate the body response to low oxygen. Genetic studies show that this variant came from Denisovan ancestry or a closely related archaic source. Say that slowly in the mind. A vanished human group learned, through evolution, how to breathe more easily in thin air. Later, modern humans met them or their descendants. Children were born. The gene crossed over. Today, it still helps living people in high mountains. The Denisovans are gone as a distinct people, but some of their breath remains. Imagine a high plateau long before history. Cold sky, harsh light, stones clicking underfoot. A small group moving slowly where the air feels almost empty. Their bodies carry old adaptations, written not as thoughts, but as blood chemistry, breath, rhythm, survival. They do not know they are solving a problem for future humans. They are just trying to live. Denisovan ancestry also appears in immune-related genes in some populations, suggesting that, like Neanderthal DNA, it may have helped modern humans face unfamiliar diseases and environments. When Homo sapiens moved into new regions, they did not arrive as blank slates. They sometimes borrowed biological tools from humans who had already lived there for hundreds of thousands of years. A Neanderthal immune variant. A Denisovan altitude adaptation. Perhaps other gifts from unknown ghost populations. Our species survived partly by carrying pieces of others. But the Denisovan story grows stranger still. Their genome contains signs of interbreeding with an even older, unknown, archaic human group. We do not have a clear fossil name for these people. We do not have their faces. They are ghosts inside ghosts, a hidden branch glimpsed only because its DNA passed into Denisovans, then perhaps onward in fragments. This is where the tidy tree becomes a thicket. For a long time, people wanted human evolution to be simple. One line rising upward, a few side branches, a clear arrival. But every new genetic discovery makes the picture more crowded. Populations split, meet, mix, separate, and meet again. Species boundaries blur. The old world was not a hallway. It was a landscape of crossing paths. Denisovan ancestry in islands Southeast Asia and Oceania raises difficult questions. Modern humans clearly crossed seas to reach Sahul, the ancient joined landmass of Australia and New Guinea. Whether Denisovans themselves used boats, occupied island routes, or passed ancestry through populations along the way remains debated. We should not force certainty where the evidence is still thin. But the possibility is there. Exciting. Now think of the world after the meetings. In one region, modern humans carry Neanderthal DNA. In another, Denisovan DNA. Somewhere else, traces of unknown archaic humans. The body of Homo sapiens becomes an archive of encounters. The skin, the blood, the immune system, the lungs, all carrying hints of lives that did not continue as separate nations of being. And yet, as distinct groups, they faded. The Neanderthals disappear from the archaeological record. Denisovans vanish more mysteriously because we see them so poorly in bone to begin with. Perhaps some were absorbed into expanding modern human groups. Perhaps some were trapped in shrinking habitats. Perhaps climate, competition, disease, and chance did their slow work. There may never be one answer. The darkness of this story is not a single terrible event. It is the quiet realization that whole kinds of humans can be reduced to fragments. A yuff, a tooth, the finger bone of a child, a few percent in a genome, a gene that helps someone breathe, with no memory of the people who first carried it. The fire near us gives a soft sound. The candle leans in its own wax. If you look at your hand in the low light, it is easy to think it belongs only to you, only to your parents. Perfect, only to the recent world. But beneath the surface, deep time has folded many meetings into the body. A Neanderthal beside a winter fire. A Denisovan child in a Siberian cave. A high plateau family breathing cold, thin air. Unknown humans in African or Asian landscapes whose names we may never know. All of them gone. All of them not entirely gone. And south of those cold caves and high plateaus, on a green island wrapped in humidity and bird calls, another human story waits. This one is smaller in body, stranger in shape, and so unexpected that when its bones first appeared, many people thought there had to be some mistake. On the island of Flores, the air is warm and wet, the kind of air that seems to carry leaves, soil, and old rain in every breath. The cave of Liangbua opens in limestone like a quiet mouth. Outside, forest presses close. Birds call from the green shadows. Water drips somewhere in the dark. In 2003, archaeologists working there expected the usual traces of an ancient place. Stone tools, animal bones, perhaps signs of modern humans passing through the island world of Southeast Asia. Then the earth gave them a body that did not fit. The skeleton was small, not child small. Adult small. The teeth had erupted. The pelvis and bones showed maturity. Yet the person stood only a little over a meter tall. The skull was tiny, with a brain case often compared to a grapefruit. At first, it seemed almost impossible. A human adult with a brain so small, living not in the deep beginning of our story, but surprisingly close to our own time. They named the species Homo floresiensis. The world called them hobbits. And the nickname stayed because people enjoy a little fantasy with their fossils, even when the fossils are serious. But there was nothing imaginary about them. More bones appeared. Not one strange individual, but remains from several people with the same unusual pattern. Small bodies, long arms, primitive-looking wrists and shoulders, feet shaped differently from ours. A mixture of traits that did not match any modern human population, healthy or sick. Some scholars first argued that the skeleton might be a modern human with a disorder that caused a small body and small brain. That debate mattered, and for a while it was intense. But as more evidence gathered, most researchers came to accept that Homo floresiensis was a true separate human species. A tiny human, a real one. Now, imagine them in the forest. Not cute. Not fairy-like. Not a bedtime creature with a little cloak, although I admit the name makes that difficult. Imagine instead a small adult standing under enormous leaves, listening to insects, watching the movement of birds and lizards, holding a stone blade shaped by experience. The world around them is scaled differently. A fallen branch becomes a barrier. Tall grass becomes cover. A large animal becomes a moving wall of muscle. On Flores, there were dwarf elephants called stegodonts. Even dwarf is a generous word when you are only a meter tall. These animals could still be heavy, dangerous, and difficult to kill. Yet at Liangbua, cut marks, broken bones, burned remains, and tools suggest that Homo floresiensis hunted or scavenged and butchered them. Small humans with small brains, doing work that required planning, cooperation, and nerve. This is where the story becomes wonderfully inconvenient. For a long time, many people assumed that bigger brains meant better humans. A simple idea, easy to remember, and wrong in all the ways simple ideas often are. Homo floresiensis had a small brain, yet made tools, used fire, or at least processed burned animal remains in a context where fire appears, and survived in a difficult island environment for a very long time. Intelligence may depend not only on size, but on organization, body, culture, and what a species actually needs to do. Island life has its own strange rules. On islands, large animals often shrink over time. Food is limited. Big bodies cost energy. If there are fewer large predators, being huge may no longer be worth the price. This pattern is called island dwarfism. Elephants become smaller. Other creatures change in unexpected ways. Flores was a kind of evolutionary workshop, cut off by water, forcing every species to negotiate with limits. One leading idea is that the ancestors of Homo floresiensis were larger humans, perhaps related to Homo erectus, who reached the island long before. Once isolated, generation after generation, their bodies became smaller. Their brains shrank too. Yet enough of their practical intelligence remained for life to continue. They became a compact version of humanity, not lesser, just different, shaped by island hunger and island safety and island constraint. How did their ancestors reach Flores? That question sits like a shell in the hand. Even during ice ages, when sea levels were lower, Flores was separated by deep water. No one could simply walk there from the Asian mainland. Perhaps early humans arrived by accident, carried on storm debris after floods or tsunamis. Perhaps they made simple rafts. Perhaps they crossed in some way we cannot yet imagine. The evidence does not let us speak with certainty. The sea took the footprints, but once they were there, they stayed. For hundreds of thousands of years, some form of human life existed on Flores. Stone tools on the island stretch far back. Homo floresiensis itself seems to have survived until roughly 50 to 60,000 years ago, according to current evidence. That is astonishingly recent. Around that same broad time, Homo sapiens was moving through Southeast Asia toward Sahul, the ancient landmass that included Australia and New Guinea. So there may have been a moment when our ancestors and the hobbits shared the same island region. Maybe they never met. Maybe they did. If they did, what would that encounter have felt like? Modern humans. Tala, more numerous perhaps, with wider networks and flexible tools, moving through island chains. Small forest humans, watching from green cover. Two kinds of people, separated by body size, history, language, and perhaps fear. No account survives. Only cave sediment, bones, tools, and silence. And then, after around 50,000 years ago, the trail of Homo floresiensis disappears. There are no more confirmed bones. No clear continuation. Just the emptying of a cave. The forest taking back the paths. The little stone tools lying still in the dirt. Perhaps climate changed. Perhaps a volcanic eruption disrupted the island. Perhaps modern humans arrived and competition became too much. Perhaps disease moved through a small population. Perhaps several pressures came together, as they so often do. Extinction rarely has the courtesy to leave one clean clue. There is one more detail, soft and strange. On Flores. Local stories have long spoken of small cave-dwelling beings called Ebu Gogo, often described as hairy, pot-bellied, able to mimic speech, sometimes troublesome to villagers. Some versions say they stole food. Some say people drove them away or burned their refuge. Anthropologists are careful here, and they should be. Folklore can change quickly. It may not preserve memories from tens of thousands of years ago. Small wild people are a common shape in human imagination. Still, the coincidence is haunting. An island with the bones of a tiny human species, and stories of small cave people lingering in the oral dark. We cannot say the stories remember Homo floresiensis. We can only notice how the island seems to whisper twice. Bone once, folklore later. From Flores, let the path move north and east, across water, through humid air, to another island where the ground offered a different surprise. Luzon, in the Philippines. In Calao Cave, archaeologists found small bones and teeth that again did not fit cleanly into known categories. A foot bone first, then teeth, finger bones, toe bones, parts of a thigh bone. The remains were dated to roughly 67,000 years ago. The teeth were small in some ways, but carried strange primitive features. The finger and toe bones were curved, suggesting climbing abilities more like much older hominins. The overall pattern looked like a mosaic. They named this human Homo luzonensis, another island. Another small and puzzling human. Another reminder that Southeast Asia was not an empty corridor waiting for Homo sapiens to arrive. It was alive with experiments. To reach Luzon, some human ancestor had to cross water. Stone tools and butchered rhinoceros bones on the island date back hundreds of thousands of years. long before modern humans are known there. Maybe Homo erectus or another early human crossed by accident. Maybe by simple craft. Again, the sea gives no easy answer. Once isolated, the descendants changed. Island life shaped them in local ways. Small body size may have helped. Curved fingers and toes may reflect climbing in forested terrain, or retention of older traits. Their teeth followed their own path. They became not a copy of Flores, but a separate island solution. I find these island humans especially humbling. They make our tidy diagrams look a little embarrassed. We like neat arrows. Africa to Eurasia. Erectus to later humans. Sapiens spreading at the end. But islands interrupt neatness. Water isolates. Forests hide. Small populations wander into strange futures and stay there long enough to become something no one expected. A small island body can hunt large animals. A small brain can sit inside a complex life. A hand that remembers climbing can still shape stone. A species can survive quietly beside ours and leave almost no trace at all. Before we leave the islands, listen to them for one more breath. Rain taps on leaves. A small foot presses into mud and fills with water after the foot is gone. Somewhere a tool is set down beside a fire, not as a relic, just because the hand is tired. The person who used it does not know that one day strangers will measure the stone and try to rebuild an entire world from its edge. They only know the night is coming, and the forest is full of sound. The fire near us lowers again, and the room feels deeper. Flores gives us the little humans of the forest. Luzon gives us another island branch. Neither story leads neatly to us. They are side paths. Yes, but side paths are still paths. For those who walked them, they were the whole world. And beneath a different sky, far from these islands, another human story waits in darkness. Not in tropical leaves, but deep inside a South African cave, where thousands of bones lie in a chamber so difficult to reach that even the discovery feels like a descent into the mind of the earth. The Rising Star cave system lies near Johannesburg, beneath a landscape where people pass over deep time without feeling it under their feet. That is one of the strange things about the past. Sometimes it waits below ordinary ground, in limestone passages, in places where the modern world has been walking above it for years. In 2013, recreational cavers were exploring a narrow side passage when their lights touched bone. Pale shapes in the dark. Human-like shapes. They took photographs, and those photographs reached paleoanthropologist Lee Berger. What they showed was not a single bone, not even a small scatter. The chamber seemed to be full of remains. There was a problem. To reach the bones, a person had to move through a steep and narrow route, then squeeze through a vertical chute only about 18 centimeters wide at its tightest point. That is roughly the width of a small plate. Most adults could not pass. The work needed scientists who were trained, careful, and small enough to enter a place that seemed designed to refuse the living. 6 women answered the call. They became known as the underground astronauts, which sounds like a joke until you imagine the descent. Stone pressing against shoulders. Breath slowed on purpose. helmet light trembling on pale walls, knees finding holds, hands sliding over rock polished by darkness and time. Then the final chamber, Dinaledi, the chamber of stars, a name that feels almost too beautiful until you remember that stars are also distant fires. And this place was full of the dead. Inside were thousands of bones, skulls, earths, ribs, hands, feet, pieces of children, adults, older individuals. Not one unlucky person. Not one accident easy to explain. A population. The species was named Homo naledi, after the word for star. At first glance, Homo naledi seemed ancient. Very ancient. The brain was small, around 460 to 610 cubic centimeters, much closer to early Homo than to us or Neanderthals. The shoulders sat high and old-fashioned. The fingers were curved, strong, good for climbing. Parts of the trunk and pelvis had primitive traits, as if the body had kept memories from early chapters of the human story. Then other bones complicated everything. The feet were remarkably modern, arched and suited to walking. The legs were long compared with the arms. The teeth were small. The hands, despite curved fingers, had features useful for precise manipulation. Homo naledi was a mosaic, one of those fossils that makes the neat textbook picture quietly put on a coat and leave the room. Old and new in one body. The dates made it stranger. Researchers eventually placed the remains at roughly 236,000 to 335,000 years old. Not 2 million years. Not a relic from the first dawn of Homo. This species lived in Africa around the same broad period when early Homo sapiens or close relatives existed. So while our own kind was taking shape, another small, brained human walked the same continent. Now comes the part that still unsettles people. Softly, like a sound in another room. How did the bones get so deep in the cave? The chamber is hard to reach. There is no clear evidence that predators dragged bodies there. No obvious sign that water washed the bones in. No simple collapsed entrance has solved the problem. Because of this, Berger and colleagues proposed that Homo naledi may have placed their dead there deliberately, returning to the chamber over time. Not everyone agrees. Some scholars argue that cave systems change, that ancient entrances may disappear, that accidental explanations cannot be fully ruled out. Others think the pattern fits deliberate placement better than anything else. The debate remains alive, and it should. When evidence is dark and partial, certainty can become its own little cave. But let us sit with the possibility. A small-brained human, not Homo sapiens, not Neanderthal, carrying the dead into deep darkness. What would that mean? Maybe it was ritual. Maybe it was practical disposal, keeping bodies away from the living. Maybe it was habit, repeated until it became meaning. Maybe they understood death only as absence, but absence was enough. We must be careful not to dress them in our own beliefs. Yet we should also be careful not to deny them inner life simply because their brains were small. Imagine a line of figures in the dark, not in bright electric light, but perhaps with fire, if fire was used there, though that too is debated. The passage is narrow. Stone catches skin. Someone carries a body, or part of a body, or guides the dead through the route in some way we cannot reconstruct. There is effort, risk, repetition. A body is left in the chamber where no sun comes. Dust on fingers, breath against stone. Then the living climb back toward the surface. Whether we call that burial, disposal, or something unnamed, it is not nothing. Homo naledi asks a question that lingers after the bones are catalogued. How much brain is needed for memory, for care, for the feeling that the dead should be treated in a special way? We do not know. Perhaps less than we thought. From the cave of stars, let the story widen again. Away from the chamber and into the middle reaches of the human family tree. There was a time, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when large-bodied, large-brained humans stood at a fork in the path. Scientists often gather some of them under the name Homo heidelbergensis, though the name is debated and not everyone draws the same borders. In Africa, related fossils have also been called Homo rhodesiensis, archaic Homo sapiens, or more recently, by some researchers, Homo bodunsis. The labels shift because the bones are difficult, and because humans enjoy arguing about other humans, especially when the other humans cannot object. But whatever we call them, their place in the story is crucial. These were powerful Middle Pleistocene humans, living roughly between 700,000 and 300,000 years ago. Their skulls were thick, their brow ridges strong, their bodies robust, their brains often large. Sometimes within the lower or middle range of modern humans, they were not quite us. Not Neanderthals yet. Not Denisovans in any simple, visible way. They were near the crossroads. One famous early find came from near Heidelberg in Germany, a massive jaw discovered in a sand pit in 1907. It had no chin, and it was heavy in a way that modern human jaws are not. Later fossils from Europe, Africa, and elsewhere seem to share a rough pattern. Large brains, strong faces, thick bones, and bodies suited to a hard life. These humans were hunters of serious ability. At Schroningen in Germany, wooden spears dating to around 300,000 years ago were found with horse bones. They were not crude sticks. They were shaped, balanced, carefully made from wood, with points formed from dense parts of the trunk. They are among the oldest preserved hunting weapons in the world. Think about the hands that made them. A tree selected not at random. Wood cut and worked. A shaft smoothed. Weight judged by feel. The point shaped. A hunter standing near a lake shore, reading the motion of horses, waiting for the instant when muscle, fear, and distance line up. This is not scavenging after lions have eaten. This is planned group hunting. Other sites connected with Heidelbergensis, like humans, show large animal butchery, elephants, rhines, horses, deer, and more. These were people who knew where animals moved, how bodies could be opened, how marrow could be reached, how a group could feed itself from danger. their world was not gentle. Climate shifted again and again. Ice advanced, then retreated. Forests expanded, then pulled back. Lakes dried. Rivers changed course. A group that survived had to remember old roots and invent new ones. It had to teach children not only where food had been, but how to think when food was elsewhere. In Europe, some of these populations seem to have moved gradually toward Neanderthals. Bodies became more cold adapted. Faces took on stronger Neanderthal traits. In Asia, related populations may have contributed to Denisovan ancestry, though the picture is still tangled. In Africa, other related humans moved along the path that would eventually lead to Homo sapiens. This is the fork in the old road. One broad-shouldered ancestry, or a cluster of closely related populations, giving rise to several futures. Neanderthals in the West, Denisovans in the East, modern humans in Africa. The lines are not sharp. Nature rarely draws with a ruler. Populations split and meet. Traits spread. Groups isolate for a while, then reconnect. What looks like a clean tree from far away may have been a web on the ground. The African fossils are especially important and especially debated. The skull from Kabwe, once called Broken Hill, in what is now Zambia, has a massive brow, a broad face, and a brain size within the modern range. It has been assigned to different names by different researchers. Some use Homo rhodesiensis, though that name carries colonial history many prefer to avoid. Some fold it into Homo heidelbergensis. Some support newer labels like Homo bodoensis for African Middle Pleistocene humans closer to our own lineage. The naming can feel dry, but beneath it is a living question. Who were the people just before us? They stood between Homo erectus and us, between the first great wanderers and the later species who would crowd the world. They carried forward endurance and tool-making, but added bigger brains, broader cooperation, more dangerous hunting, and perhaps richer social memory. The Neanderthal body did not appear from nowhere. Denisovan adaptation did not float in from mist. Homo sapiens did not step out of Africa fully formed, as if the earth had finally decided to tidy up. We came through these middle humans, through their climate stress, their hunts, their camps, their children, their losses. The names may change as science sharpens. Heidelbergensis, Rhodesiensis, Bodoensis, Archaic Homo sapiens. Each label is a candle placed in fog, but the figures themselves remain. They are the ones at the fork. From them, different futures walked away into different darks. One future became Neanderthal, stocky and winters strong. One became Denisovan, wide-ranging and mysterious. One became us, restless, social, dangerous, imaginative, lucky. And around those futures, still more faces were waiting to be found. A skull hidden in a Chinese well. Unusual people in caves with red deer bones. Teeth and fragments from islands. Ghosts in DNA with no face at all. The farther we walk, the less the tree looks like a tree, and the more it becomes a forest at night, full of trunks We only notice when the candle passes near them. By now, the human family tree has stopped looking like a tree. It looks more like a forest seen at night, with one small candle in the hand. A trunk appears, then another behind it. A branch crosses a branch. Something moves in the dark and you realize the path was never straight. For decades, many people wanted a clean diagram. Early ape like ancestors below, Homo erectus above them, then large-brained ancestors, then Neanderthals off to the side, then us standing at the top with the expression of someone who thinks the museum was built in their honor. But the ground kept opening. Caves kept giving back teeth. Islands kept giving back small bones. DNA kept whispering names that bones had never spoken. In the Philippines, on the island of Luzon, Homo luzonensis appeared from teeth and fragments, curved finger bones, curved toe bones, a mixture of old and new traits that did not sit comfortably in any category. On Flores, Homo floresiensis had already shown that tiny humans could live with stone tools and dangerous animals in a green island world. In South Africa, Homo naledi had carried its strange mosaic body through the same broad age as early Homo sapiens. In Siberia, a child finger bone had revealed Denisovans. In China, skulls and fragments raised more questions. There were the red deer cave people, found with the remains of red deer that had been cooked and eaten. Their fossils seemed to show a puzzling blend of modern and archaic traits. Some researchers have wondered if they were a late, surviving, archaic group, or a hybrid population, or simply unusual early Homo sapiens. We cannot be sure. Their bones are partial, and the line between one humankind and another is not always where we wish it would be. Then there is the Harbin skull, sometimes called Dragon Man. It had been hidden for decades, then studied more recently as a possible new species, Homo longi. A large skull, a broad face, heavy brow ridges, a brain case comparable in size to ours. Some scholars argue it may be closely related to us. Others suspect it could belong somewhere near the Denisovan story, perhaps giving a face to a ghost we have mostly known through DNA. The debate remains open, and the skull waits calmly while living people disagree over it. That is one of the quiet lessons of this subject. Fossils do not panic when we change their names. They sit in drawers, patient as stones, while our categories shift around them. And the categories do shift. Homo heidelbergensis, Homo rhodesiensis, Homo bodunsis, archaic Homo sapiens, Denisovan related, late archaic, hybrid, new species, old species, regional variant. Every label tries to draw a boundary around lives that were probably messier than labels allow. Nature does not care if our chart is readable. A population can split for thousands of years, change in one valley, change differently in another, then meet again when the climate opens a corridor. People can have children with outsiders. A tret can move. A tool idea can move. A story can move. Then ice comes back. The corridor closes. The groups drift apart again. From far away, later scientists see shapes in bone and draw branches. On the ground, the branches may have been braided roots. Now place yourself 50,000 years ago. The continents are familiar in their outlines, but the living world is not the one outside your window. Ice sheets hold enormous amounts of water, so sea levels are lower. Coastlines stretch farther out. Deserts swell and shrink. Forests open, then close. Grasslands become temporary roads for animals and the humans who follow them. This is not the age of one humanity. It is the age of many humanities. In Africa, Homo sapiens is thriving, but not yet in the way later history will know us. Small groups move through coasts, in woodlands, wetlands, savannas, and mountains. Some gather shellfish near the sea. Some follow antelope across open land. Some dig roots, collect plants, trap small animals, and turn many kinds of food into survival. Our strength is flexibility. Not glamour, perhaps, but very useful. A species that can change dinner plans has a real advantage, as anyone with an empty pantry understands. Across Europe and Western Asia, Neanderthals hold their ground. They know cold. They know the animals of glacial valleys. Their camps cluster near caves, river crossings, and places where stone and game can be found. Their lives are dangerous, physical, and intimate with the land. They are not many, perhaps, but they are skilled. Farther east, Denisovan-related populations occupy a vast and poorly understood world. Mountains, plateaux, Siberian forests, Chinese river valleys, perhaps parts of Southeast Asia. Some may be adapted to high altitude. Some may live in temperate landscapes. Some may pass their genes into modern humans moving through the region. We see them dimly, like figures behind frosted glass. On Flores, tiny humans may still be near their ending. In forest and limestone, small feet press into mud. On Luzon, another island, humanity may climb, gather, and shape stone. In southern Africa, Homo naledi itself may already be gone, or perhaps related small populations still persist somewhere beyond our evidence. We should not claim more than the bones allow, but the possibility reminds us how incomplete the map remains. If you could see the planet from above, not with modern borders, but with each human presence glowing like a coal, the world would not be one color. It would be a patchwork. A Neanderthal glow in the west, a Denisovan glow across great eastern distances, a sapiens glow in Africa and beyond, small island glows in Southeast Asia, other glows perhaps, unnamed, unproven, hidden in places where bone does not preserve. And between them, barriers, water channels that cannot be crossed by walking, mountain ranges, drylands, glaciers, dense forests, distances so large that one group may live and die for countless generations without meeting another. These barriers shaped bodies and habits. They kept lineages apart long enough for differences to deepen. But climate is restless. Ice advances, then retreats. Rain belts shift. Deserts bloom for a few thousand years, then close again like a door. Grasslands open between regions that were once blocked. Coastlines move. Rivers change. Animals migrate along new paths. When the land opens, humans move. And when humans move, other humans meet them. This is where the long vanishing begins to gather its shadows. Not as one event, not as one battle, not as a single terrible winter, more like a slow dimming across the map. Modern humans enter lands where other humans already live. Sometimes they compete for the same animals, the same shelters, the same stone, the same water. Sometimes they learn from one another. Sometimes they have children together. Sometimes, surely, they fight. The evidence does not give us a simple morality tale. It gives us overlap. Competition may have been one force. Homo sapiens seems to have been highly flexible, able to use many foods, many tools, many social connections. If one group can survive on big game, fish, shellfish, roots, birds, and small animals, while another depends more heavily on a narrower range, even a small difference can matter. Not today, perhaps. Not tomorrow. But over centuries, a few more children live through winter. A few more elders survive long enough to teach. A few more groups recover after a bad season. A valley that once held two kinds of humans slowly holds one. Climate may have tightened the pressure. The late Ice Age world was unstable. Cold phases arrived. Warm phases returned. Herds shifted. Forests moved. Familiar hunting grounds changed shape. Neanderthals had survived climate swings before. Yes, they were not fragile. But when rapid climate changes combine with new competitors, disease, small population size, and shrinking refuges, even a strong species can be pushed too far. Disease may have traveled too. When long separated populations meet, microbes meet with them. A cough, a fever, a parasite, something invisible moving through breath, blood, or touch. We know from later history that disease can devastate people with no prior exposure. For Ice Age humans, no one wrote down the losses. Disease would leave mostly absence. Fewer children. Empty shelters. A group too small to recover. Violence may also have played a role, but probably not as a simple global massacre. There are injuries on ancient bones. Humans have always been capable of hurting other humans. Yet we do not find a single clear layer where all Neanderthals fall at once beneath Homo sapiens' weapons. More likely, conflict happened locally, unevenly, sometimes decisive, often mixed with other pressures. Then there was absorption. This is the gentler, stranger ending. Some Neanderthals and Denisovans did not vanish into nothing. They entered us. A small group under pressure may join another. A woman or man from one people may live among another. Children grow up with mixed ancestry. Over time, the old group identity dissolves. The genes remain. The separate name, if there was one, disappears. From the ground, this would not look like extinction. It would look like marriage, adoption, captivity, alliance, Homo, survival. It would look like children learning a new word for fire. For island humans, the ending may have been sharper. Small populations on Flores and Luzon were vulnerable. A volcanic eruption, a climate shift, a change in prey, disease, or the arrival of more numerous Homo sapiens could have been enough. Islands are beautiful, but they are also traps when conditions turn. Un by un, the lights thin. A Neanderthal valley becomes silent. A Denisovan mountain route is walked by other feet. A small island cave no longer holds the same tools. A hidden human lineage leaves only a trace in DNA. Then no living form of its own. By deep time standards, the world of one human species is new. Strange. Almost lonely. Once, if you walked far enough, you might meet another kind of human. Different face, different body, different language, perhaps different ideas about death and stars. Now every human face belongs to one surviving species, though not to one single story. The old diversity did not leave cleanly. It seeped into us, then disappeared around us. So, as the candle lowers and the room becomes quieter, hold the image of the ancient planet for one more moment. Not empty, not primitive, not waiting for us. Full of fires, full of watching eyes, full of hands making tools in different ways. Then watch, very slowly, as those fires shrink into the dark, until only one remains bright enough to light the future. The last fire is ours, but even that is not a simple thing. When scientists began to read ancient DNA, the silence of the vanished humans changed. Bone had always spoken in shape. A brow ridge, a yav, a tooth, a thigh bone, a hund. But DNA spoke in inheritance, and inheritance is more intimate than stone. Ancient DNA is fragile. After death, heat, water, bacteria, and time break it apart. It frays into tiny fragments, like a burned book scattered across a cave floor. In cold and sheltered places, some pieces survive. A bit of bone powder from a Neanderthal, a tooth from Denisova cave, sediment that once held a body or a touch. Scientists separate ancient human fragments from soil, microbes, and modern contamination. Then compare the pieces to living genomes. It sounds clean when said quickly. It is not clean. It is patient work, careful work, full of doubt and repetition. A little dust from a bone. A machine reading broken code. Computers arranging scraps until an old pattern begins to appear. And when the pattern appeared, it told us we had never been alone inside ourselves. People outside Africa carry Neanderthal DNA. Many carry around 1 or 2%, though the amount varies. Some people in Oceania and parts of Asia carry Denisovan ancestry too, in some cases several percent. In Africa, researchers have found hints of ancient mixture with unknown archaic groups, and also later backflow from populations that had already mixed elsewhere. The details are complex, but the message is clear enough. Homo sapiens did not simply replace everyone and walk away untouched. We met. We mingled. We changed. Some inherited Neanderthal variants, affect the immune system, especially regions involved in recognizing pathogens. Imagine early modern humans entering Eurasia. New cold, new soils, new parasites, new diseases riding in breath and water. A Neanderthal immune variant, shaped by long residence in that world, might help a child survive one more fever. That child grows. The gene remains. Other Neanderthal fragments touch skin and hair, pain sensitivity, sleep patterns, fat storage, and blood clotting. These inheritances are not simply gifts. They are trade-offs. A gene useful in a dangerous Ice Age body can become troublesome in a modern city body that sits too long and sleeps too little. The past is practical, not sentimental. So when we say Neanderthal DNA lives in us, we are not talking about a curse or a blessing. We are talking about history, still negotiating with biology. The Denisovan inheritance has its own quiet power. The most famous example is the EPAS1 variant found in many Tibetan people, helping the body live at high altitude without overproducing red blood cells. Thin air is not poetic when you must raise children in it. It is a daily test. Denisovan-related humans seem to have carried a solution, and through ancient mixture, that solution entered Homo sapiens. Somewhere on a high plateau, under a severe sky, the body learned to breathe. That sentence feels almost too simple for what it means. A vanished people, or their close relatives, solved a mountain problem before us. We borrowed the answer through children. Today, the answer still works. There are other Denisovan traces too, especially in immune-related regions across parts of Asia and Oceania. And beyond Neanderthals and Denisovans are the ghosts. Genetic patterns that seem to come from archaic human populations we have not clearly identified in the fossil record. Humans without faces. Humans without museum displays. Humans known only because a few of their genetic fragments still sit inside living bodies like sealed notes from a burned house. This is why the end of the other humans cannot be a clean extinction story. They are gone as separate peoples. Their languages are gone. Their songs are gone. Their ways of greeting morning are gone. But pieces of their bodies crossed into ours. We are the last human species. Yes, but not the untouched survivor. We are a mixture, an old page written over but never fully erased. The question remains, why us? Why did Homo sapiens survive while the others faded? The easy answer is that we were smarter. Easy answers are often suspicious, and this one is too. Neanderthals had large brains. Denisovans may have had large brains as well. Homo erectus survived longer than we have so far. Homo floresiensis did complex things with a small brain. Brain size alone does not explain the ending. Maybe the difference was organization. Some genetic studies suggest that certain regions where modern humans differ from Neanderthals and Denisovans involve brain development, growth timing, and connections between nerve cells. Perhaps our brains became wired in a way that made imagination, planning, social reading, and symbolic thought unusually powerful together. Not more mind in a simple sense. A different rhythm of mind. Language may have been part of it. Neanderthals probably had some capacity for speech. and perhaps rich communication. We should not deny them voices just because we cannot hear them. But Homo sapiens may have pushed language into a more flexible, Symbolitsform, a tool that could bind many minds into shared worlds. With language, you can tell someone about a water source 3 valleys away. You can describe a trap to a child before the child ever sees it. You can plan a hunt with roles and warnings. You can remember who helped, who lied, who owes whom. You can speak of ancestors, spirits, rules, promises, and dangers that are not present in the room. That is a strange power. To make invisible things real because enough people believe them. Social networks may have been one of our strongest tools. If a Neanderthal group was small and isolated, a bad winter could be devastating. If a Homo sapiens group was connected to distant relatives, trading partners, and allies, it had options. Move to another valley. Ask for help. Exchange mates. Share a new tool design. Borrow a story that carries useful knowledge hidden inside it. Culture became insurance. Numbers mattered too. Larger, more connected populations create and preserve more innovations. A clever idea born in one place can spread. A new blade shape. A better needle. A shell bead that marks belonging. A hunting method. A way to store knowledge in ritual and story. If a group is too small, good ideas can die with one elder. If groups are connected, ideas survive the fragile body that carried them. This may have created a feedback loop. More people allowed more culture. More culture helped more people survive. More survival created more people. Slowly, the balance tipped. But we should be careful. Survival is not proof of worth. Evolution is not a moral judge. It does not reward kindness, wisdom, beauty, or fairness. It rewards whatever leaves descendants under particular conditions. Neanderthals did not vanish because they were foolish. Denisovans did not vanish because they failed some exam. Homo floresiensis did not disappear because smallness was shameful. Each was adapted to a world, and the world changed. We were lucky too. A drought that ended sooner. A corridor that opened at the right time. A group that survived a bottleneck by a handful of births. A useful gene borrowed from a neighbor. A social habit that happened to scale. If the climate had turned differently, if disease had moved differently, if a few migrations had failed, perhaps another human would be sitting by another kind of fire, wondering why we vanished. There is no crown hidden in our skull. There is only a result, for now. And that result is lonely. Once, there were many ways to be human. Imagine the lost perspectives. A Neanderthal sense of cold, strength, pain, and closeness. A Denisovan world of high plateaus, river valleys, and perhaps island roots. A Flores human story told from the height of a child but the age of an adult. Unknown humans in Africa and Asia, whose names will never be known because no bone has carried them to us. We did not only lose species, we lost minds. Their jokes are gone. Their lullabies are gone. Their warnings about particular rivers and cliffs are gone. Their words for moon, Ash, tooth, mother, Homo, and home are gone. We can measure their bones, but we cannot ask what they feared. We can read their genes, but we cannot hear how they comforted a child. That is the true darkness of this story, and it is a very quiet darkness. The universe, as far as we know, is mostly empty of minds. On this small blue planet, intelligence bloomed more than once within the human family. Different forms of awareness looked at fire, animals, weather, death, and stars. For a brief window, Earth held several answers to the question of what a human could be. Now there is one. That makes us precious, not superior. It makes us responsible, not crowned. We carry the memory of fragility in our bodies. We carry traces of relatives who vanished under climate pressure, competition, disease, small numbers, chance, and mixture. We carry the power to change the world more profoundly than any human before us. That power once helped us survive. It may also become dangerous if we forget how fragile a thinking species can be. The lost humans remind us that intelligence is not guaranteed a future. Culture can vanish. A whole way of seeing the world can disappear so completely that only a tooth remains, or a finger bone, or a faint signal in a genome. So when you look at your own hand in dim light, try to see it as more than yours. It is a present moment resting on deep time. Homo erectus walking. Neanderthals tending winter fires. Denisovans breathing thin mountain air. Island humans moving through wet leaves. Unknown ancestors crossing droughts, rivers, and nights with no moon. All of that reaches you, not as a straight line, but as a weaving. The room is very quiet now. The fire is low. Candle wax has softened at the rim. Outside, the modern world continues with its engines, windows, and restless lights. But beneath it, the older world is still there, not under the ground only, but under the skin. We are the last humans standing, for now. Last is not the same as best. Last only means that the story has narrowed to us, and what happens next depends on the choices of the living. If this long walk through the vanished human world kept you company, you can like the video, subscribe, and leave a small note about where this old story found you tonight. A city window, a quiet room, a train, a bed in the dark. For now, let the old fires settle around you. Let the Neanderthal cave grow dim. Let the Denisovan plateau fade into snow. Let the island forest close its leaves. Let the cave of stars return to silence. We are here because they once were. Good night.